Welcome everyone to the For His Namesake podcast, where we talk about leadership skills for this generation and how they can use those skills in their church, community, and school, but most importantly, their entire Christian walk, which is what we're most concerned about. Today, I'm joined by Garrett Waddell, been one of my closest friends. I'll tell how we met in a little bit. I go to school with him at Southeastern Free Will Baptist College. And so we met at Snowed In 24 this year. So we've known each other about 6-7 months, I can't count, something like that. But I know from the moment I met him, there was really something different about him, and that he was really wanting to serve the Lord. And I didn't really know at the time that we were going to be going to college together and both going to be pastor, but I think it's awesome that we are. And the topic that we're doing today, which I'll get into at the end, really shows how I think everybody should be, and good friends help build each other up in this certain aspect. So just to introduce yourself, Garrett, just tell us about your testimony, all about that.
All right, so like you said, my name is Garrett Waddell. I can't remember who I heard say this one time, but I think it was a preacher during revival, and I've heard my dad kind of say the same idea to me before, that when I was being raised, my parents, they wanted me to have a boring testimony, which kind of is said as a joke, but in a real way, that is, I think, a good idea for parents to have, and that is how I was raised, was what I think how Christian parents should raise their kids, which is bring them to church, put them in a Christian school, teach them to read their Bibles, do devotions with them, teach them how to pray, and that's how I was raised. We were in church every time the door was open.
All right.
Christian school since I was 4 months old, up until I graduated, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Seriously, going to faith my entire life. I got the training that I needed, especially now going to college to be a pastor. I got the training I needed to pursue that. And I really did have a pretty boring testimony. I got saved when I was about 5 or 6, got baptized a few years later. And then the 6th grade, I had a chapel service preached by Curtis Linton. And he talked about wanting to actually do something with the fact that you're saved. Wanting to actually try to please God with your life and follow, look for God's will, which is kind of a crazy chapel service for a 6th grader, I'd say, but it got a hold of me. And I was like, I know I'm saved, I know I've been baptized, but I want my life to count for something, So I went to the altar and I sort of rededicated my life to Christ, and then kept on having a pretty boring testimony. Up until I was 14, I was in the 9th grade, and my mom's cancer came back. She had battled cancer 3 times before, and it came back for the 4th time. And I really would say my mom was the strongest person I've ever known. And the way she handled that battle was solely depending on the Lord. There were even aspects of her fight with cancer that I didn't even know about until after reading what she had wrote about it on her iPad, and it was just prayers to God. And so she passed away on January the 6th, and 2021. And then that is when I would say, I was in 9th grade, like I said, that is when I would say my faith became if it was going to last, it was because I was choosing for it to. It had to be real to me, it had to be personal, and it had to be reliable. And I learned a lot about the faith that I had, the things I didn't know about, how do you handle that as a 14? I was 15 when she died. So how does a 15-year-old handle that, And so there's a lot of, obviously, sadness, there's depression, and I went to a dark place in my life for a while. And what got me out of it was starting to lean on God. And when I realized that that's what my mom had been doing the entire time, was leaning on God, that's when I started to do that. And that's when I realized it was going to be okay. God had a plan in this, God had a purpose through this. And it's funny now because I can look back and 100% see what that purpose was. Because I went to Youth of Flame, that was in January, Flames in July or June. So it was 4 or 5 months later. I go to Youth of Flame. Jeff Jones preaches out of Ecclesiastes about not wasting your life. not letting your life just be vanity. And I go to the altar after that service that night, and I said, Lord, I don't really know what you're calling me to, but I believe it's ministry.
Right.
And that's when I would say that was a personal decision. That I can remember when I did it, not really knowing what I was doing, because I still don't really know what ministry is going to look like in my life, but I knew if I'm the type of guy where I'll overthink stuff like crazy. So it's like if this is gonna last, if I'm not gonna get home and when you have that fall off, when you go back and you get out of your Bible, it's like, well, I definitely don't want to go back to home and then get out of the decision I've made and I'm gonna go into the ministry, So I immediately told my whole youth group, immediately after I prayed it, I was like, guys, I'm being called to the ministry. I wanted to tell everybody, I wanted to scream it from the mountaintop, seriously, because it was just such an awesome moment for me. And that was when Marcos was my youth pastor. So Marcos was and he was so proud of me. He seriously was. He gave me the biggest hug. And then I think about 5 minutes after that, he announced he was leaving us. So that was very good timing. But then the rest of high school happened. So I was in 9th grade when that happened. Then the rest of high school happened. And I did a lot of things that was stupid, that I'm not proud of, that I wish I could change. But a man named Craig Taylor he looked out for me. He called me out on the stupid stuff I did, but he looked out for me. And he wanted to see me do right. And we got into a little bit when he became the acting youth pastor. We really did. But I realized he was right about a lot of stuff he had called me out on, just the way I was acting. And so what happened was he takes me to Snowden in 2023, or it could have been 2, I don't really remember. But he said, I want you to talk to Brother Seabury about going Southeastern. I was just like, okay, but we can talk all you want, but I'm not committing myself to anything right now. And talked to Steve Barry, gave me a little connection card to fill out, whatever, filled it out, give it back to him. And really had no desire to want to go Southeastern. And prayed about it a lot. By the 11th grade, I was positive I was going to be going to Pensacola, actually. And then just continued to pray about it. Got a lot of connections during my senior year with Chance Howard and Josiah Falero being hired at Faith. Chance Howard was my youth pastor. Josiah was kids pastor. So I really had no connection with him, just beside the fact that he became one of my best friends in my life immediately. And obviously he graduated from Southeastern, and so did Chance being my youth pastor. They both encouraged me so much to just give it a thought. And that's when I actually, signed up for Southeastern, registered. And when I got accepted, it was just I'm going to Southeastern. It was obvious to me. I was excited for it too. And now that I've actually come, I've seen how great of a campus it is and just an environment to be in when you seriously want to get closer with God and you want to be seeking Him daily. Especially if you know that some aspect of your life is going to be involved with the ministry. I don't think there's a better place that you can be trained at and be ready for it. And it was really funny because when I look back in middle school, which I'm not really sure why this was even a thing in middle school, but Southeastern would come to the middle schoolers at Faith and be like, you didn't think about Southeastern? And it was that left more of a negative impact on me than it did a positive, honestly. But I'd sit in the back row for all those meetings and make fun of Southeastern with my friends. And I was like, I'm not going to that school. And then it's kind of funny too, it just proves that God has a sense of humor, because my roommate now, it was absolutely one of my least favorite people in high school. So he was the grade above me, and we never got along. We'd always be fighting with each other. And then, now he's one of my best friends, seriously. And just different aspects that when I've opened myself up to God and allowed Him to do things, He's just opened so many doors. I think about, the fact that Chance came to Faith, and then I just brought up Chance one day. I was like, I can sing. There's a few others of us that at Faith that can sing. It's like, what would it take to get involved with singing at Snowden? And he said, I'll get back to you on that. I honestly expected to never hear from him again about it. And he comes back and he's like, "You're gonna sing Snowden, so like you need to like start packing your bags." So we go there, and then can I get to how we met?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we get there, and they take us to this Japanese restaurant, and I love Japanese food. This Japanese food was terrible. I don't know how y'all feel about it there, but I was not a fan. And I get my food, and I guess I gotta sit down somewhere, you know. I see you at a table, so I'm gonna sit next to this dude because I got a whole day to spend with people I don't really know, so might as well introduce myself. And then now you're one of my absolute best friends. I don't even know what we could have possibly been talking about at that table.
It probably wasn't anything good, but
Probably not, but
it's okay.
just the way God has worked in so many areas and just opening so many doors. And I look back on it now, it's like, it's almost uncanny, just the way everything lines up perfectly. Like God's will is always going to be a complete picture on the other side of it. Like once you've gone through it, and I'd say for me, that was always my mom. Made no sense in that moment. Made no sense to me. But I've told a lot of people that, like, I don't know if I've ever would have answered the call to ministry if I wouldn't have been so broken and like destroyed through a situation where I had to lean on God. Not that I really opened myself up to, which some people do that, you know. But for me, it was like I had nowhere else to go. It was just God, and you know that's probably the only reason I'm even in this room right now. Just the way God always has a perfect plan in mind is really what I see when I look back on my testimony.
Right. And that's a really powerful testimony about, you know, how that certain situation with your mom dying, passing away, how it broke you to the point of saying, this is the only option I have is God. And it makes me think of Matthew when the first disciples were called to be fishers of men. And they asked Peter, you know, what are you going to do? And Peter said, Lord, I have nowhere else to go. And that's what it made me think of. Like, you had no other option.
Yeah.
The Lord is the only place to go for me. And it's amazing how God opens doors and closes doors, and how often that I've had to learn in my life, and I'm sure he's learned in his life, that if a broken heart gets you closer to God, then thank God for the broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just amazing how God works in our lives and how he puts people in your path just at the right time. But in transition, well, of course, this is a leadership thing, so we'll sneak a little bit of leadership in there. So what, I know we're pretty young, so we haven't had that many leadership opportunities, but what are some, you know, leadership opportunities that you've had?
Well, a lot of it has been very recent. Like I said, I didn't really have I wouldn't say I had a bad testimony in high school. I just, you know, I didn't really get involved in many things that I could have. In the past, like 2 years, really, especially with Chance being hired. Chance opened a lot of doors for me. He liked that I could sing and he wanted me to get involved with stuff. So I would say one of the big ones was like being able to be on stage at Snowden. So people act like that's like next to impossible to do for some reason. And if I can do it and I'm not a good singer, then that says something. But that we started doing a worship team in our youth group again. So I was able to lead worship for my peers, which I thought was really cool. He started after church on Wednesday nights. We'll have prayer groups and we'll split up, and I got to lead one of the prayer groups. I was able to go on 2 leadership retreats in the past year, and one like a year and a half ago. I'm able to sing my praise team at church. So it's just a lot of stuff. Like, and I'd say being the leader, you don't necessarily have to look for opportunities. Right. It's just being willing to accept the ones you're given.
Right.
Josiah, like I said, one of my best friends, has given me so many opportunities recently. He's just like, hey man, you want to preach kids church this week? And I've prayed a lot that whenever I get given an opportunity like that, I don't say no. And now if I feel like God doesn't want me to do it because I'm unprepared or for whatever reason, then no will be the right option, you know. But if I'm able to, I'm not going to say, God, no, just because it's inconvenient or something, you know.
Right.
So I try to say yes to as many opportunities as possible. And then for like doing kids church, just like being willing to do that, that's all you got to do is just say yes to it. And God will use you, you know, because it's like the words I'm saying when I'm preaching is I mean, what does it matter what I say? I'm nobody. But if I open up the scripture and I study it and I let the Spirit speak through me, I think that's what leadership is.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. Taking any opportunity you get that you can do, take it, no matter if it's so small and you think it's so insignificant, still doing it. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is that God's glorified through it.
Yeah.
That's all that matters at the end of the day. So there's some leadership stuff that you've done over the past few years, but what, in your opinion, is the main aspect of leadership?
I'd say it's either humbleness or integrity, which kind of go together.
Right.
You have to be humble, definitely. You can't. I think we all know that the people that put themselves in positions of leadership that we've seen before, were not actually viewed as leaders. I mean, just throughout history, you can see that. I think of like great, powerful figures that everybody looks at now and it's like, well, no one respected them; they feared them, Right. And that's kind of different things. Mm-hmm. And then, so you definitely have to be humble. Right. And then integrity, right, is what you're saying matching up with what you're actually doing, mm-hmm, or what you're doing when people are watching, the same as what you're doing when people aren't watching. Right. I mean, I feel like that was a big thing for me. Was I never really wanted, like when I do a prayer group for the teens, I never really wanted to tell them something or give them advice when they come to me with something, right, that I wouldn't follow myself, mm-hmm, or wouldn't want to tell them, like, if they're struggling with something, you need to do this, if I was also struggling with it. I'd rather tell them I struggle with that too than be like, oh, just do this. Give them the Bible answer. I want to be personal with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's integrity. Right.
And who would you say that you look up to? Who exemplifies that?
There's a lot of guys. Definitely my dad, first of all. Especially for the past close to 4 years now, being raised by a single father. I've seen him overcome a lot of struggles and adversities, just as confident in the Lord, and understanding that this has a purpose, and still raising me to understand that. When I've seen so many people get absolutely just crushed by a tragedy in their life, and instead of leaning on God, they run away from Him. And my dad was not going to let me do that. And I was just say my pastor, Christian Powell, is so cool now because I've heard him preach for the past 15 years. And now I'm being taught as an actual student by him. And it's so much more personal now. And even the things I knew about him, like just how much I look up to the man, I really do. But now I'm still being taught, like, okay, what does it mean to be a pastor? What does it mean to have integrity? I believe in the class like Foundations of Pastoral Integrity. Mm-hmm. Then, like I said, I'd say Chance and Josiah, these dudes, and especially since they're not that much older than me, but they know a lot more than me. Right. And they have just been such an encourager of me to do what's right, mm-hmm, in a Christian school, which is a harder thing than people think, I think. Mm-hmm. They've encouraged me to actively seek God's will daily and try to walk in the steps that He'd have me to take daily. And then I'd say some of my Bible teachers throughout high school. So Brother Patel, he taught me basically apologetics senior year. And then Chris Edmonds, he taught me about the book of John. Made me realize it's my favorite book of the Bible. And they've all just showed me, especially being men of authority in the church, that the things they've taught me and said to me, I can look at their lives and say, like, it lines up with the things they're doing. Mm-hmm. They don't say something because it's what the Bible says. They say something because they actually believe it, because it came from the Bible. And I look up to all these guys. They've impacted my life more than they ever know. And they just mean a ton to me and have helped me realize what it is to be a leader.
Mm-hmm. And, the characteristic that you said was humble, which in my opinion is, if not the greatest aspect of leadership, because if you're not going to be humble about being a leader, then you don't need to be a leader. It's just that simple. Because the whole For His Namesake ministry, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's all about God. That's the whole purpose of leading and leading people to Christ, and just being a mentor to people is leading them and getting them closer to Jesus, which is our topic for today. Possibly my favorite topic to talk about is being more like Jesus. And the whole reason that this is called this is because of a song by Passion called More Like Jesus, and that was kind of also part of how we met, because it snowed in this year. How the conference ended, which in my opinion was just so moving by the Holy Spirit, was they sang More Like Jesus. And it was just a moment of worship, pure worship, and how we need to strive to be more like Jesus. And in the song it says, in this world there's people dying to know who you are. So Father, I pray, make us more like Jesus so we can show them how to be more like Jesus. But that really brings up the question, how are we supposed to be more like Jesus? I mean, in my opinion, there's three things, and chip it anytime you want to. First thing is being a servant. You got to get your towel dirty. You got to be willing to do the dirty work, the things that nobody else wants to do. Like Garrett said earlier, taking opportunity, any opportunity that you get, even if you think it's the most pointless thing ever, giving a devotion to, or just leading a prayer, like at the end of the youth group or whatever it may be, or blessing the food. Those are all opportunities. So take any one of them, but also being a servant, getting your hands dirty, be willing to do the dirty work. Cleaning toilets is, cleaning toilets for Jesus. That's what all the pastors say that they did, even though I can't picture any of them cleaning toilets. But it's important that we be a servant, because Jesus came to serve. And Christian Powell talked about it today in class, which was like, wow, this is all lining up. How all the disciples were arguing about who's going to be the greatest in heaven, who is going to be sitting at the right hand of the Father, who's the greatest one of us. But in the midst of all that, Jesus is getting ready to wash their feet, which I don't like feet, me personally. I think feet are disgusting. And especially you have to think, today, we have, it's better to be easier to get cleansed these days. But back then, they walked miles with sandals on. There's no telling how disgusting their feet were. But Jesus lowered himself below everything just to clean their feet, to show a point of how not me, but Jesus came to this world to serve people. Because it says in the Bible that the first will be last and the last will be first. And I think Jesus exemplified that every time he went somewhere or he did something. He always put other people first. And, it kind of goes back to what you said about being humble. Being a servant is every part of being humble. Because if you're going to be a servant and go clean toilets, you humble yourself pretty quickly, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
You humble yourself pretty quickly. Like, I guess Garrett would understand, but I guess a lot of our young preachers, which we're all guilty of it, wanting to have that spotlight in church. We want to be the preacher that's want to be seen. We want to have the biggest opportunity, you could say. One day preaching at Youth Flame or the National, or just preaching in church on Sunday, But that's not being humble. Being humble is going where God wants you to go and doing what He wants you to do. And, what do you think about being humble like Jesus?
Well, I think the first line of that song that you brought up was, you came to a world you created to trade your crown for a cross. Mm-hmm. And I remember just being on stage singing that song, and it's like, the first line's already making me cry, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You're just like, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
But when you just think about that, like seriously think about it. like what in the greatest aspect, like when you look at it from the greatest lens, like what are we?
No.
And I mean, this whole world is like a speck to God, less than a speck. And He loved me enough to come down to His creation that like doesn't even seek Him anymore. To give them an opportunity to still get to know Him,
Right.
because we have felt Him.
Exactly.
And that's like the word humble doesn't even describe that greatly enough. So I hate that we even use that word, honestly.
Right.
But if that sacrifice can be made, then I can clean a toilet. But like, what does it matter if I clean a toilet?
Right.
I know I used to joke with Chance about it because anytime there was something at Faith that needed to be done, like stuff that needed to be moved around on stage or whatever,
Right.
or there was a lot of trash or something, or we were setting up for youth activity, he texted me, and then it would always be me and two other guys in the youth group. And one of them lives about 3 seconds from the school. And me and the other guy live about a mile from each other, but about 30 miles from the school. But he texted me and this one guy, and I'm like, why can't you just text the guy that lives so close to the school? But I never told Chance no. Because if there's something that I could do for God, and looking at it from the aspect of all that God has done for me, then I wasn't going to say no to that.
Right.
Even though it was humbling, that was a humbling choice that I wanted to make. And there's also just been things that I've looked at and I'm like, I've been asked to do in the church or at school, and I said, that's not my job. But I want to do it anyway, especially if I'm being asked to. I remember one time, it actually kind of broke my heart. I was in the bathroom at school, and there was like a paper towel on the ground, and I reached down, picked it up, put it in the trash can. And then one of the like custodial people was coming in, and they said, "Oh, you don't have to do that. We can do that." And I said, "Like, I did nothing. Like, I just threw a paper towel away, because we're in a church. I don't really want trash on the ground in my church." That's not a sacrifice. I think true humbleness is when you realize that work like that's not a sacrifice. It's the least we can give.
And what he said through that first line of the song, trading your crown for the cross, all that speaks of is love. And leadership is love, because you're willing to do anything for other people. Because leadership is people. I mean, you're leading other people. I mean, that's the whole point of leadership, is you have to lead somebody. And you got to be willing to do that stuff. And if you're willing to do that stuff, even though it may not seem significant, you're pleasing. You may never get recognition on here for it, but your Father in heaven's like, that's my servant right there. That's the person that's made in my image. And he's following my commands. No matter how insignificant that is, he's doing the will of the Father. Because he realized that God sent his Son to die on the cross for him, so that the whole world through him could be saved. And that's what I think about every time, because I get so convicted about I have to do something, or like you said, there's something on the ground. Like I'll start to walk by it and I'm like, I can't move. And then I'll go back and pick it up. It's like literally the Holy Spirit like stops me. Like, go pick that up. Because that's the least we could do. God gave everything to us, so why can't we even do a little for him? He gave his life, his only son's life, for us. And many of us aren't even willing to do those little things. And I think, in all honesty, that we all struggle with this, and that's loving. And I'm going to start to bring it to a closing, but loving and compassion and forgiveness all go into one. love, you truly love somebody, but when you break it down into compassion shows that you will do anything for that. You will go the extra mile with whatever that is, which also goes with forgiveness. When somebody does something wrong to you, which will definitely happen in leadership, there's going to be hard days ahead. And there's going to be stuff that you don't agree with. And I can go ahead and tell you, when Jesus came, there was definitely stuff that he didn't agree with. Because, I mean, think about it. When your own people try to kill you, I hope you wouldn't agree with it, you know. Or when people try to point out that you're the heretic, even though Jesus is preaching the truth to them, but they didn't realize it. We have to realize that Jesus is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. And the only way we can get closer to the Father is to be more like Jesus. And you just have to go listen to that song. And I literally cry every time I listen to it because it's so powerful. Because in essence, the topic more like Jesus is what we should strive to be. Not only as leaders, forget the whole leadership thing, but as Christians, as disciples, as followers of Christ. That's who we're called to be. Be more like Jesus. So, as we said, I want to ask you, you got any final remarks? Be a servant. Be willing to do anything. Be humble about it. When you get opportunities, don't try to make yourself all high and mighty. But most importantly, love. No man, there's no greater commandment than this than to lay down one's life for their friends. And loving others. The two greatest commandments is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So why don't we do that? Because it all points to Jesus. So, Garrett, in closing, do you have any final remarks about how important love is for more like Jesus?
Yeah, when you were talking about, especially we struggle with love, I thought about, like I said, my roommate Hunter again, because we did not like each other at all. Like, we just did not get along. We could not stand each other. And then, honestly, we needed to have him on here to tell him, or to hear his testimony. But I won't go too much into it. But he gets saved, and he's so excited about it. He starts telling everybody he's saved. And it's like, in the back of my mind, I would have never said it. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, dude, like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, you just got saved less than 24 hours ago, and here you are running around. And I just thought about it right now. I'm like, I'm so glad that that's not the way Jesus viewed me getting saved. Because I was so sure, like, he was just full of himself in that moment. And like, you don't know what you're talking about, but it's like crazy now. He's my roommate, and he's one of my best friends, and one of the most spiritual people I know. And just the way I viewed him in that moment, if Jesus would have viewed me that way, like, oh, you're being fake, you don't know what you're talking about, whatever, well, I wouldn't be here right now, definitely, and I'd be going to hell. But that's not what I was shown. I don't even know the words to describe Jesus' love. Shown to me especially. When I look back and I'm like, I actually thought of ministry. And then I pretty much wasted most of my high school doing nothing with that. And I'm like, Jesus didn't stop pursuing me. He didn't take away, he didn't pull the rug out of ministry out from under my feet. He actually used everything that I got involved with that I regret. He used that to help me get closer to him. And he just never stopped chasing after me. I was about to say the name of another song, but we won't do that. But I mean, really, his love never stops.
Right.
It's unconditional. It's everlasting. It's more powerful than anything else. And when you stop and really take a moment to think about the love that was shown to us before we could even comprehend it, it's not hard for that to mean something. It's not as hard for us to try to be humble, or for us to try to lead for actually the purpose of God and not for ourselves, you know. And I mean, I'm just grateful for the love of God, the love of Jesus Christ, and the fact that I can now have a loving relationship with Him.
Right.
And nothing can take that from me.
Right.
Nothing can take it out of His hand. Nothing can separate me from Him. And that's real love.
So I can say this in closing, that being more like Jesus, you have all those attributes, but it all boils down to love and loving others. Most important, loving the God that created you and growing closer to Him. So remember to love everybody, but most importantly, don't neglect the God that created you and the one that came and died for you because He loves you. But I want to thank you so much, Garrett, for coming. I thoroughly enjoyed this talk, and hopefully you can come back pretty soon.
I'm very thankful you had me on it. I think you're a very accomplished man. I tell everyone, when I'm talking about you, I tell everyone this, but I don't think I've told it to your face. Like, you gotta be the only teenager that I know that's a youth pastor. And dude, like, I've looked up to you a lot, I respect you a lot. And just the love that you have for Jesus, you're not doing this in vain. Like, this is real. I know what you're saying here is real. And just keep on doing it, man.
Thank you so much. And hope to see all of y'all next week on the next episode. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see y'all next week.